Hi, today's video is what to make with fabric scraps. I've got a range of things that I have made that I will show you just now. Right, where do your scraps come from? You might either do things with fabric yourself and have scraps that can be small or larger scraps. You might have old pillowcases. I got this one out of a charity shop, so you can also check around charity shops. This is actually a dress I made that is out of a tablecloth that I found in a charity shop. You might know somebody who sews and they might be grateful to not have to bin the scraps that they have. So you could ask them, if you've got any scraps you're not going to use, can you please pass them on to me? And any of these scraps, including old clothes that you've cut up, this is an old dress, you can use for these projects. Some of them require large pieces of material, some of them very, very small. So I'll go through them. I'll start with roughly the largest and work my way down to the smallest pieces. Two makes to start with: making aprons, small ones obviously for children, can be made out of slightly larger scraps that you might have, or pieces of clothing that you've cut up. The ribbon is something, if you don't own, you would have to buy. Lots of shops sell these for £1. I got this one out of Tiger. You can get them at Hobbycraft. There are other shops that I can't think of off the top of my head that do them, but this is 15 metres, so it does a lot of projects, and they could be used for bunting that I'll be going on to in a bit as well. This is a pillowcase that I made out of longer scraps of fabric. I will write in the description box the book that I got this pattern from. You're basically just starting, every piece is the same thickness, and you're starting from smaller rectangles and working your way out in a kind of circular fashion with longer and longer pieces until you have the size that you want. And then just put pieces of material in the back for this cushion cover, and then you can put on a button or clasp to help hold it together. To fill it, you can buy cushion inserts. You might have an old one with a cushion cover that's a bit knackered. I have been saving up little scraps. I was going to just be using little scraps of fabric to fill it. A, that would take a lot of scraps. B, it already weighs a fair amount, so this would be a crazily heavy cushion. So I might end up just buying an insert for this instead. To the kitchen next. Lots of things for the kitchen. If you are not able to sew or do not have the equipment to sew, but you do have a pair of scissors that will cut through fabric, this is just a piece of old towel. It's getting very scrappy now. I literally just cut it and I use it to clean soil off of vegetables. Various rags for cleaning around the kitchen or around the house. Old pair of pyjama bottoms, lining from a dress. Cotton is the most absorbent. I will describe later on how to test your fabric to see whether it's cotton or not if you are not sure. These are reusable sponges that I made out of rectangles of fabric. I made a pattern out of a piece of paper, deciding how large I'd want them, and then cut small rectangles of fabric, ones of towel, and just some scrap bits of fabric inside to bulk it out a bit. This is a very old one. I need to make some more. I will film that when I do and show you step by step how I make these. I do the same with slightly larger pieces, and they make paper towels that can be used for various things in the kitchen. They don't fray like just the chopped up pieces that I've used, so these ones should last a bit longer. And again, I've got a towel on the back, so these are extra absorbent. If you can afford to buy beeswax online, you can make beeswax wraps. Again, I will make a video of how I do this. It's just basically using an iron to melt beeswax into fabric. I've got smaller pieces here. They can be folded round, say half an onion that you've got in the fridge, and the heat of your hand will be enough to mould the fabric around whatever you choose to wrap it around. With a bigger piece of fabric, you can make larger sandwich wraps. So this one I've attached a button and a piece of twine to the end. You can place your sandwich inside, fold over the corners, and then wrap your twine round to give yourself a sandwich wrap. Another kitchen item, this ties in with reusing jars to store different items of food, is just if you've got jars that the lids are not too pretty to look at, again you can make a template on a piece of paper and then cut round it. I have used crimping scissors round the edge to stop it fraying, and to place it on the jar I used an elastic band just underneath. You can use like the small elastic bands you get, for example, that come around spring onions, and then that little ribbon is just one of those ones that you cut off of clothing, so the wee ones that are on the shoulders. Can be a bit faffy if you want to take that on and off every time you use your jar, but really nice if you're giving it as presents. If you didn't want to have to keep taking an elastic band off, you could also soak this in some beeswax and then it would literally just mould around the jar, and it's much easier to take on and off. This next one is not my make, this is something that my mum made. This was a Christmas present. You can cover plastic hairbands, or you can make hairbands without anything solid inside, just full circular ones if you have stretchy fabric. Again, you would have to look up a pattern online how to do this, but you do not need very much fabric to do it. Now we're getting on to the much smaller pieces of fabric. You can cut small triangles out of pieces of fabric. This one is fairly small, but again, you make a template out of a piece of paper and you can decide how large or small you want it. Again, you can use your crimping scissors down the side to stop it from fraying if you want it just a single piece of fabric, or if you would like to make your bunting slightly fancier, you can sew two together back to back and make double-sided bunting. Could be the same pattern each side, different pattern on the other side if you wish, and then that ribbon that I told you about before, you can place it on your ironing board and iron it so it folds in half, and then sew all your different triangles in a line to create your bunting. A different style of bunting using really small pieces of scrap this time. I have a canvas bag where I've been saving up my slightly larger pieces of scraps, and when they get too small to even make things like bunting etc. with, I have been cutting them into little strips and then tying them round. This is just a piece of wool, you can use anything, and I've just literally tied them in a knot. So again, this doesn't require any sewing, and it's just really thin pieces of fabric. Takes a fair while and a fair amount of fabric, but you could have it prettily strung up in a room and just keep adding to it as you go. Depending on when you're watching this video, these may be appropriate or not. I made a face mask out of some Star Wars fabric for my other half, and it was the inside of that pillowcase I shown you. It's a partner pillowcase. I used that on the inside so you can make double-sided face masks. That was his version. Mine was made out of both sides of the pillowcase and is reversible. This is for smaller pieces of fabric that might have nice pretty patterns on them. I had one there with owls, got one here with cherries. You can cut out the patterns in these and decoupage them, so paint them over with PVA glue onto jars. I couldn't find my jar that had separate images on them. This one is just one solid piece of fabric with leftover scraps of ribbon going round. Just on, I think this is an old mayonnaise jar. Getting on to the last few now. I have made very small makeup remover wipes, just out of small squares of fabric. You have to be careful, it's a very soft cotton because you don't want to scratch your face with it. You don't want anything rough against your face. So that is very small squares sewn back to back. Baby bunting, little bunting. This is out of pieces of felt, but again, you could use small scraps of fabric. There is no ribbon going along. I literally just put them through the sewing machine one by one so that they join together just using the thread from the sewing machine. The next one, I don't actually have the item because I gave them away as presents, but I made hand warmers that you can put in the microwave using rice on the inside. So again, it would be just making a pocket by sewing together obviously something larger than this and filling it with rice. You can then put little bits of lavender if you have them inside as well to create a nice aroma. Look up online how long to put them in the microwave for, because you don't want to burn them. They give off a horrid smell if you put them on for too long. Getting down to the very end now, tiny little scraps that you can imagine you can do absolutely nothing with. I was originally saving them to stuff the inside of my cushion cover, but I have not saved up very much and they start to get quite heavy quite quickly. So my new plan for them is I am going to create a hay box oven. A hay box is basically using insulation to continue cooking. So you could put a pan on the stove to boil, take it off, wrap it in insulation and it will continue cooking. I am planning to make a fabric style hay box out of these scraps of fabric, and again I will post a video when I make that. The basic test for cotton. If you have a piece of material you think might be cotton but you're not sure if there's any man-made fabrics mixed in with them like polycotton, take a thread, so you can pull at the edge and get a thread or snip one off, burn it. If it is pure cotton, the flame will be quite pure, it won't be black and smoky, and you will see the end of it turns to a kind of grey char, a bit like if you burnt a piece of paper, and you can feel the end when the flame's gone out is nice and smooth. If it is some sort of mix like polycotton, so if there's any man-made materials in there, the end will curl up, it will go hard, like you'll feel the plastic at the end once it's cooled down, and you will know that if you need a project that you want to use pure cotton for, not to use that piece of fabric. These are different pieces of equipment that you might like to have when undertaking these projects. So dressmaking scissors, very important to use because they will cut fabric a lot easier than normal household scissors. They can be relatively inexpensive to buy the cheapest pair and still work pretty well, just sometimes they can be a wee bit stiffer to use. Do not use them for cutting anything like paper, not even once, they blunt so easily. Next one, pinking shears or crimping scissors. They have a serrated edge, they will stop things fraying. The kind of obvious things to have just some thread, some needles. Again, these can be purchased quite inexpensively. Having pins if you're wanting to pin patterns in place. This is another thing I made from scraps. This is one of the first things I actually sewn. My pin cushion, my mum helped me make this. And whenever you have spare buttons, especially if you're maybe throwing out clothing or don't need the spare buttons from them, save them up in a jar. They can be very useful for sewing projects. A lot of these items are useful items for around the house and can make great presents. Let me know in the comments if there's any projects you've been undertaking using scraps, and let me know if you would like to see any how-to videos based around some of the projects that I've shown you. If you would like to see more of these videos, please hit like and subscribe.